Good evening, dear students. Today, I, Mrs. Anne Mary, is here with the new chapter, its reading and explanation part, The Bond of Love. Introduction of the chapter, The Bond of Love. The story highlights the emotional bond between human beings and animals. The narrator's wife shares affection with a wild bear and they get attached to each other, shows that animals have feelings and reciprocate to love with warmth and affection. So, let's start the chapter. I will begin with Bruno, my wife's pet sloth bear. I got him for her by accident. 2 years ago, we were passing through the sugarcane fields near Mysore. People were driving away the wild pigs from the fields by shooting at them. Some were shot and some escaped. We thought that everything was over when suddenly a black sloth bear came out panting in the hot sun. Now, the narrator's wife got a pet sloth bear as a pet due to an accident. Now, 2 years before the time when the story was written, the narrator and his friends were passing through sugarcane fields near Mysore. Farmers were driving out pigs from their fields by shooting at them. As it was apparently over, suddenly a sloth bear appeared from the fields and it was breathing heavily due to running and the excessive heat. Now I will not shoot a sloth bear, want only, but unfortunately for the poor beast, one of my companions did not feel that the way about it and promptly shot the bear on the spot. Now the narrator says that he would never shoot at a bear without any reason, but one of his companions did, and the bear was shot dead. As we watched the fallen animal, we were surprised to see that the black fur on its back moved and left the prostrate body. Then we saw it was a baby bear that had been riding on its mother's back. When, when the sudden shot had killed her, the little creature ran around its prostrate parent, making a pitiful noise. Now, the animal lay on the ground, but a part of its furry black body moved. It was a baby bear that had been lying on the mother's bear's back. Now that the mother bear was dead, the baby got up and ran around the mother's body, crying. I ran up to it to attempt a capture. It scooted into the sugarcane field. Following it with my companions, I was at last able to grab it by the scruff of its neck, while it snapped and tried to scratch me with its long, hooked claws. Now the narrator tried to catch the baby bear. The bear escaped into the sugarcane field. The group chased it and finally the narrator caught hold of it from the back of its neck. The bear tried to scratch them with its hook-shaped claws. We put it one of the gunny bags we had brought, and when I got back to Bangalore, I duly presented it to my wife. She was delighted. She at once put a colored ribbon around its neck, and after discovering the cub was a boy, she christened it Bruno. Now the group stuffed the bear in a gunny bag and took it to the Bangalore. Now the present day it's Bangalore. The narrator gifted the bear cub to his wife and she was happy to have it, tied a colored ribbon around its neck. As it was a male cub, she named it Bruno. Now Bruno soon took to drinking milk from a bottle, and it was but a step further, and within a very few days he started eating and drinking everything else. And everything is the right word, for he ate porridge made from many ingredients, vegetables, fruit, nuts, meat, especially pork, curry and rice regardless of condiments and chilies, bread, eggs, chocolates, sweets, pudding, ice cream, etc., etc., etc. As for drink, milk tea, coffee, lime juice, evaporated water, buttermilk, beer, alcoholic liquor, and in fact anything liquid, it all went down with relish. Now the bear drank milk from a bottle. Now, after a few days, it started drinking and eating many things, everything and anything. The bear enjoyed eating and drinking. The bear became very attached to our two Alsatian dogs and to all the children of the tenants living in the bungalow. He was left quite free in his younger days and spent his time in playing, running into the kitchen and going to sleep in our beds. Now it became very friendly with the narrator's Alsatian dogs also. and also with the tenants' children who lived in the narrator's bungalow. Now, one day an accident befell him. I put down poison, barium carbonate, to kill the rats and mice that had got into my library. Bruno entered the library as he often did, and he ate some of the poison. Paralysis set in to the extent that he could not stand on his feet, but he dragged himself on his stumps to my wife, who called me. I guessed what had happened. Of course, I rushed in the car to the vet's residence. A case of poisoning, tame, barium carbonate. What to do? Now, accidentally, Bruno drank the poison kept in the library to kill rats, and he was paralyzed and could not stand on its feet. As it reached the narrator's wife, she called him, and he realized what had happened. He took Bruno to a veterinary doctor. Out came his medical books, and a feverish reference to index began. What poison did you say, sir? Barium carbonate. Ah, yes, Baba. Barium salts. Ah, barium carbonate. Symptoms, paralysis, treatment, injections of. Just a minute, sir. I'll bring my syringe and the medicine. I dashed back to the car. Bruno still floundering about on his stumps, but clearly weakening rapidly. Some vomiting, heavy breathing, with heavy flanks and gaping mouth. Now hold him, everybody. In goes the hypodermic. Bruno squeals. 10 cc of the antidote enters his system without a drop being wasted. 10 minutes later, condition unchanged. Another 10 cc injected. 10 minutes later, breathing less stirrs. Now Bruno can move his arms and legs a little, although he cannot stand yet. 30 minutes later, Bruno gets up and has a great feed. He looks at us disdainfully, as much as to say, what barium carbonate to a big black bear like me? Bruno is still eating. Now the doctor asked everyone to hold Bruno. As it screamed, the medicine was injected, as the condition did not change. Now, another injection was given. 10 minutes later, Bruno breathing eased. It could stand after 30 minutes and ate food. Now, another time he found 1 gallon of old engine oil, which I had drained from the sump of the Studebaker and was keeping as a weapon against the inroads of termites. He promptly drank the lot, but it had no ill effects whatever. The months rolled on, and Bruno had grown many times the size he was when he came. He had equaled the Alsatians in height and had even outgrown them, but was just as sweet, just as mischievous, just as playful, and he was very fond of all of us. Above all, he loved my wife, as she loved him too. She had changed his name from Bruno to Baba, a Hindustani word signifying small boy. Yes, small boy. And he could do a few tricks too. At the command Baba Whistle or Baba Box, he vigorously tackled anyone who came forward for a rough and tumble, give him a back stick and say, Baba, hold gun. And he pointed the stick at you. Ask him, Baba, where's the baby? And he immediately produced the cradled affectionately a stump of wood, which he had carefully concealed in his straw bed, but because of the tenants' children, poor Bruno Baba had to be kept chained most of the time. Now all the days passed, Bruno grew bigger and outgrew the Alsatian dog. Still, it was sweet. Now, he had hidden the piece of wood under the straw bed. As he had grown big, he was chained because he could be a threat to the tenants' children. Now, then my son and I advised my wife, and friends advised her too, to give Baba to the zoo at Mysore. He was getting too big to keep at home. After some weeks of such advice, she at last consented. Hastily, and before she could change her mind, a letter was written to the curator of the zoo. Did he want a tame bear for his collection? He replied, yes, the zoo sent a cage from Mysore in a lorry, a distance of 87 miles, and Baba was packed off. Now we all missed him greatly, but in a sense we were relieved. My wife was inconsolable. She wept and fretted. For the first few days, she would not eat anything. Then she wrote a number of letters to the curator. How was Baba? Back came the replies. Well, but fretting. He refuses food too. Now, after that, friends visiting Mysore were begged to make a point of going to the zoo and seeing how Baba was getting along. They reported that he was well but looked very thin and sad. All the keepers at the zoo said that he was fretting. For 3 months, I managed to restrain my wife from visiting Mysore. Then she said one day, I must see Baba. Either you take me by car or I will go myself by bus or train. So I took her by car. Now, she would ask her friends visiting the zoo to visit Baba and check out on him. Now, everyone gave a similar report that Baba was not fine. Though he was fine, but still appeared thin and sad. The staff at the zoo said that he seemed worried. Now, friends had conjectured that the bear would not recognize her. He had thought so too. But while she was yet some yards from his cage, Baba Baba saw her and recognized her. He howled with happiness. She ran up to him, petted him through the bars, and he stood on his head in delight. Now, their friends had predicted that Baba would not recognize her, and the narrators had thought so, but to his amazement, she was a few steps away from the cage when Baba saw her and recognized her. He screamed with happiness. He ran up to him, petted him, and Baba was very happy to have her back. For the next 3 hours, she would not leave that cage. She gave him a tea, a lemonade, cakes, ice cream, and what not. Then closing time came and we had to leave. My wife cried bitterly. Baba cried bitterly. Even the hardened curator and the keepers felt depressed. As for me, I had reconciled myself to what I knew was going to happen next. She remained there for 3 hours. And she fed Baba in different things, which were his favorites. Now, even the zoo in charge was sad. The narrator was fine because he knew that the next step would be to take Baba back along to Bangalore. Oh, please, sir, she asked the curator, may I have my Baba back? Yes. Hesitantly, he answered, Madam, he belongs to the zoo and is government property now. I cannot give away government property. But if my boss, the superintendent at Bangalore, agrees, certainly you may have him back. Now, there followed the return journey to Bangalore and a visit to Superintendent's bungalow. A tearful pleading. Baba and I are both fretting for each other. Will you please give him back to me? He was a kind-hearted man and consented. Not only that, but he wrote to the curator telling him to lend us a cage for transporting the bear to Bangalore. Now they returned to Bangalore and visited Superintendent at his bungalow, and she cried and requested that both of them had been worrying for each other. She requested to have Baba back. The Superintendent was a kind-hearted man and he accepted her request. Back he went to Mysore again. Armed with the Superintendent's letter, Baba was driven into the small cage and hoisted on tops of the car. The cage was tied securely and a slow and careful return journey to Bangalore was accomplished. Once home, a squad of coolies were engaged for special work in our compound. In our compound, an island was made for Baba. It was 20 feet long and 15 feet wide and was surrounded by a dry pit or moat 6 feet wide and 7 feet deep. A wooden box that once housed fowls was brought and put on the island for Baba to sleep in at night. Straw was placed inside to keep him warm and his baby, the nail stump along with his gun, the piece of bamboo, both of which had been sentimentally preserved since he had been sent away to the zoo, were put back for him to play with. Now, in a few days, the coolie hoisted the cage onto the island and Baba was released. He was delighted, standing on his hind legs. He pointed his gun and cradled his baby. My wife spent hours sitting on the chair there while he sat on her lap. He was 15 months old and pretty heavy too. Now, when the place was ready, the workers placed the cage to the island and Baba was removed from it. He was happy to be free, stood on his back legs, pointed the stick and cradled the piece of wood. The narrator's wife spent many hours with him as he lay in her lap, although he was 15 months old and was quite heavy in weight. The way my wife reaches the island and leaves it is interesting. Yes, putting one foot in the loop, she kicks off with the other to bridge the 6-foot gap that constitutes the width of the surrounding pit. The return journey is made the same way. But who can say now that a sloth bear has no sense of affection? No memory and no individual characteristics. Yes. Now, the narrator's wife visits Baba frequently, and the way in which she reaches and leaves the island is interesting. They have a rope tied to a mango tree with a loop at one end. She would place one foot in the loop and kick off with the other. This way, she would fly in the air to cover the 6-foot long distance to reach the island. She would make the return trip in a similar way. On seeing the affection shared by Baba and the narrator's wife, we can conclude that animals have emotions. They remember people, and all of them have individual qualities just like the human beings have. So, dear students, I hope you like the story. Thank you and have a nice day ahead.